Okay, hello. This is just a wee video. I've had some requests for short top tips on some of the postures that we're doing in class, and this one is revolved triangle. So the starting point for this posture is to look at where your feet are. So in traditional triangle, where we're just nice and open to the side, you've got the alignment between the front foot either in line roughly with the instep or the heel of that back foot, and the back foot at 45 degrees. We're going to keep that back foot 45 degrees-ish, but actually the issue here is if you keep that back foot in line with the front foot, is being able to turn so you can comfortably face forwards. I'll show you what I mean. So if we've got the alignment from trikonasana, then turning, unless you're incredibly flexible in the back and hips, I guess hips, then yeah, it's not particularly easy. Not only to face forwards, I can already feel it kind of doing kind of slightly strange things in my lower back, and I definitely don't want to be tweaking or moving any of those sacroiliac joints at all. Lovely. So come back up. What we need to do is just step the back foot forward. So instead of a leg length apart, we're about 2/3 of a leg length. And for me, I have a little bit to the side. So it may well be sit bone or hip distance apart for the feet. So this back foot is a really key anchor point. We're just going to start by bringing the hands onto the hips and just come down to a nice tabletop. So notice this front hip here is the hip that's going to be drawn and kind of stretched around the outside. Notice if that feels, already as if the hip's wanting to kind of come round to the left. What we're going to do is just have the hands on the hip creases there, or where they're kind of the top of the thigh, and just keep drawing that back. Lovely. So this is the first kind of point of alignment. We've got a nice feeling of contact in the outer edge of that back foot. We'll come down to a nice tabletop, and then the next part is rotating from the waist. We're not rotating here at all. We're wanting to keep that nice and stable. So navel hugging back, gently start to rotate round to the waist. You can just practice this at home. You can rotate the other way. You can have the arms open if you like. I think adding the arms in just adds a little bit more complexity, and we're more likely, if we're not getting much rotation, to start to compensate with this top shoulder. And so I would say, when you're first coming into this posture, and especially if I'm not warmed up, so, but especially if you tighten the hips, just keep this leading hand, whichever is the front leg, just keep that on the hip crease, just keeping kind of encouraging that back. And also notice if the spine, if you kind of leant a little bit over towards that left side in this example, if you've leant a little bit over towards the side of that front foot, then again, you can just kind of adjust yourself so you feel like you're keeping the hips even at the back, and then just coming down to a tabletop from there. So traditionally in revolved triangle, we've got the opposite hand. We're going across the body to really access and get a nice stretch into this front hip, or left hip in this case. So, here, but I'm kind of, feeling a little bit, a bit stiff, not warmed up. And actually, if you have a block in the house, then you can, using a little brick or a block can just really allow a little bit more spaciousness, keep drawing back with that hip. If you don't have a block or a brick, don't worry, you've got your leg. So again, we're just looking at this, part of the leg below the knee. Don't press onto the knee joint itself. You could always come to above the knee. And again, just using that for a little bit more height. So what can happen is, I'm kind of hobbit sized, but some people have much longer legs, and then the arms aren't quite the same proportion as mine to legs. So, the floor's too far away. So that can be one issue. Also, just depends how you're feeling in the lower back. You really want to keep that nice and stable, and then just play around with finding that length. Notice my head's gone totally over to the left. And actually what I'm needing to do is just find a little bit more of a length in the spine. Wonderful. Notice as well, if when you come forward, I'm just going to change feet, a bit of balance. If you come forward, if you notice that as you're leaning forward, you're almost leaning and taking the weight from that back heel. And what we're wanting to do is really keep anchored into that back foot, because we're stretching from there. We're stretching from there, and that's helping us keep the hips nice and balanced. So there's a couple of options for the arms. Let's add those on. So we've already mentioned just keeping them at the top of the hip crease, just to really notice what's happening in the pelvis. And actually when you add in the arms, sometimes then the pelvis, you know, it's like you're not quite drawing back, the pelvis is out here, and you feel more kind of like this, as it were, in your stance. And actually what we're looking for is drawing this hip back. Sometimes it's quite nice to imagine that this front hip is drawing back towards that back heel. And then from here you can play, you know, single arms, keeping that down, tucking up with that back kneecap is another way to really help anchor that back leg. One way that we can do to help the lower back is, instead of having the hand on the hip crease, you can just place it on the lower back. So I'll show you what I mean with that. So when you're coming forward, you'll notice if the back's kind of doing anything wonky, twisty, gives you perhaps a little bit of better sense of where the back is. Sorry, I'll swap hands, it should be that hand. So then you can think, oh yeah, just need to draw that hip back a little bit. Then you can play with placing the hand using your brick. More kind of the deeper the posture, the bricks to the outside of the front foot. You know, more accessible, the bricks to the inside of that front foot. So I'll just show you here, face on. More accessible, a little bit more spacious, more intense. You're just kind of directing the stretch more intensely into the hip. Another option is to have almost like little aeroplane arms. So you come down and then you're just turning at the waist. And you're just turning at the waist and letting the arms come with where you turn. Rather than moving the arms, you're turning at the waist, and then placing, might be down to the inside or to the outside of that front foot. And again, you can use a little bit of height. So you're looking for nice strong back leg, drawing this front hip back, almost feeling as if that front hip, this is really my really tight hip, that front hip's drawing back almost to the back of that back heel. But again, you don't want to draw back too much, so this is quite a nice way, having the hand across the lower back, kind of think, oh yeah, just kind of notice where that hip is in relation to the other hip. Lovely. And then placing the hand wherever feels comfortable. Wonderful. And inhaling, coming all the way up. So those are just a few tips for trikonasana just on the mat. Another option is to use a chair. And this can be quite a nice way, I'm going to show you this, you know, to practice at home. So if you don't have a brick or a block, but you need a little bit more height, just to kind of really play with feeling that stability in the lower back and the hips, but then that rotational aspect that's happening in the waist. Sorry, long day. So we're going to straighten the hips, you know, square on the hips as it were, and the chest towards the chair. You can have the hands on the hip as you fold down. Now this chair isn't a brilliant chair, because actually ideally you'd have a chair with 4 legs. And if you needed to, you'd be able to tuck your foot under there and not have that bar, as it were. So, drawing back the hips, coming down, tabletop towards the floor. And then what you can do is, with the opposite arm to the front leg, just have it across at a right angle to the body, which is a really nice way for getting a bit more stability. Make sure this back leg's switched on, find the outer edge of that back heel, lengthen the spine, all of these cues. You can pop that right hand there on the hip, make sure the hip's feeling nice again, put the hand on the lower back so the forearms are mirroring one another. And then from there, start to rotate at the waist. Again, you know, it's when you rotate at the waist, does that bring the weight away from that back heel? Can you actually anchor that back heel and turn from there, as it were, navel hugging back and then extending the arm up. So the gaze can be anywhere, ideally the thumb. But if doing all of that, suddenly you find that you've lost your alignment and you're feeling unstable, just pop it down to wherever you feel most stable and breathe with it. Lovely. Okay. So that is our little video on Revolved Triangle. Feel free to practice that anytime at home and give me any feedback. I really welcome your comments, and I'll see you in class.